Once again, hello and welcome to today's NEASC Virtual Global Forum, Restarting School Athletics and Activities. My name is George Edwards. I'm the Chief Accreditation Officer at NEASC. Working with me today is my colleague, Jay Stroud, who's the Director of the NEASC Commission on Independent Schools. We're so excited to see over 1,200 educators and colleagues from across the country and around the world who have signed up to listen in and share thoughts with us today. We want to thank all of you for your participation. Today, you will hear from the directors of several athletic programs and associations in the United States and abroad who have joined us to discuss the challenges facing schools and districts that have restarted or are actively planning to restart school athletics and other activities. Today's NEASC Forum, like all of our past webinars, will be recorded and made available on the NEASC website, along with all of the resources provided during the broadcast. We've created the hashtag NEASC Forum and we encourage you to use it when posting about today's forum on social media. For today's webinar, we've turned on the Zoom chat and the Q&A features. Please use the chat to send general messages to other attendees. You'll also see a list of resources periodically in the chat. You can also use the Q&A feature to submit questions for the panelists. We want to thank everyone who submitted questions with your registration. They were so helpful in planning this webinar today. Since we only have an hour, we won't have time to cover many new questions from attendees, but we'll do our best to incorporate a few. So remember to click on the thumbs up icon in the Q&A feature to bring a question to our attention. Now, I'd like to pass the conversation over to my co-host, Jay, who will start the introductions.
Thanks, George, and welcome to everybody. Thank you all for joining us, and we particularly thank all of our panelists for taking part in this discussion. We understand that we're going into today's conversation that this is an enormously complex and fraught issue, and most of the key questions, frankly, are still up in the air. I think we all saw yesterday that Los Angeles and San Diego, followed by Atlanta, are deciding not to open, so we realize some of these questions are really up in the air for all of us. Our hope today is to bring you some insight into the most pressing issues, how guidelines are being developed, and share lots of good ideas and many resources. We are very grateful to the panel because they represent a spectrum of associations of schools, not only in our region, but around our country and around the world as well. We hope to talk about faculty, we hope to talk about coaches, we hope to talk about parents, and most importantly, almost all of what we're to be focused on our kids, because our objective is always to keep kids safe. I'd now like to ask each of the panelists, and I'll do so by name, to introduce themselves very briefly, and then we're going to dive into some specific questions. So, Lamar, can we start with you, please, for a brief introduction before we get to some specific questions?
Hello, my name is Lamar Reddicks. I'm the athletic director at Milton Academy, which is just right outside of Massachusetts, Boston, Massachusetts. I've been here for 13 years. Some of the work that we've been doing so far has been, weekly or bi-weekly meetings with our league, which is the ISL, the Independent School League, and our association, which is NFhs, which is a group of New England prep schools, about 170 schools or so. So these meetings have been really helpful in getting some guidance as to what other schools are thinking and helping us form our own thinking here at Milton.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Karissa?
Well, good day to everyone. I'm Karissa Niehoff. I'm the Executive Director of the National Federation of State High School Associations, otherwise known as the NFHS. In the United States, each of our states and the District of Columbia have an association that implements the high school level state tournaments half of our states also oversee performing arts activities. Each of those state associations belongs to the National Federation. We are very in touch with our state associations as they wrestle with the return to activities, returning to school, and we're trying to provide regular forums for conversation and guidance about what return might look like. So very interested and happy to be a part of this panel today. And I hope everyone is well.
Thanks, Karissa. Martin, speaking to us from Australia today.
Thank you. My name is Martin Halpin. I'm the Athletics Activities Director at the Western Academy of Beijing. These last months, as we're all aware, we've all been looking about how to restart. For international schools, international travel becomes a major issue for us, whether it's returning staff and students, or how do we handle traveling outside our own country where we're based to participate. So there have been some of the problems we've been trying to get our heads around.
Yeah, thank you very much. Mike?
Hey, good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me. My name is Mike Lunney. I'm the incoming executive director at the Rhode Island Interscholastic League. And like Karissa said, I think the past few months have been really difficult for everyone as we've all been trying to figure out ways to plan and prepare for the upcoming school year. And obviously over the last few months, nothing's been normal about anything that we've been doing. But we've been staying behind the scenes and really trying to stay prepared and get ready for this coming school year, while also supporting our superintendents, our principals, and all our state leaders that are trying to figure out ways to get kids back to school and education first and foremost. So, you know, our goal going into this year is very, very simple. It's going to be just getting kids back to participation opportunities and hopefully giving each of them their opportunity to play their sport in some form or fashion. So looking forward to the discussion today because these meetings are helpful to all of us.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Dave?
Yeah, good morning or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name's David Utterback. I am the athletic administrator for grades 6 through 12, Brewer High School and Brewer Community School in beautiful Brewer, Maine, which is, to those of you south of Brewer, you would consider Brewer as northern Maine, but those of us in this area consider us in central Maine. So I know where you are. We're located about 20 miles south of the University of Maine campus, which is in Orono, Maine. So it's a ways up here. We're in a pretty unique situation. I've done a little bit of research and written some proposals on flipping sports seasons. I also have perspective at the middle level of activity, which is some of our younger student athletes, as president of Eastern Maine Middle School League, and some of the work that I've done with the Maine Association, the MIAAA. I'm ready to give some perspective on some of those things.
Yeah, thanks, David. Carol?
Good morning from New Hampshire. My name is Carol Dozeburn. I'm the executive director of the New Hampshire Athletic Directors Association. This is a position I am currently in my 3rd year. I retired in 2018 from public education after 41 years and 37 as an athletic director. I live on the beautiful seacoast of New Hampshire, which is the shortest coastline in the United States. And it's a wonderful place to be. Our association started a task force about a month and a half, 2 months ago, looking at what our options could be if we were to return to school and return to athletics, based on a lot of information that was out there from a variety of organizations, be it the Nfhs, CDC, WHO, etc. We're in the process of creating an additional document dealing with healthy lifestyles, which is a lesson plan, if you will, that incorporates 5 areas. And that's in the event that certain sports may not be able to run. So it will give coaches an opportunity to incorporate into what would be their regular practice plan. And that would include mindfulness and yoga, It would also include team building, which recently, kids have missed out on a lot of those things. It would also include fitness and conditioning and strategy and chalk talks, as well as sport-specific workouts. So that's a document that we're currently in the process of putting together.
That's great, Carol. Thank you all very much. So now we'll move into some of our specific questions. I would just say at the outset that we've all used the terms in some ways that these are unique times for us. And although historically, obviously, the human race is contended with diseases throughout history, this is an extraordinary situation for all of us. I think one of the things that probably all of us who have been in education for a long time, and everybody on this panel has a lot of experience, is that it is, however, not new at all for heads of schools and superintendents and teachers and athletic directors to be contending with enormous sweeping national issues and trying to help our schools through issues that are of huge social import. And obviously, not only have we been talking about the health of our kids, but this is an area where we're talking about being fair and equal and embracing for everybody, where we're concerned about prejudice across the world. And then you look at poverty, intolerance, addiction. I mean, all the things that schools have to contend with, the kids didn't invent. And so we're trying to help our kids understand issues that are beyond the borders of our individual school. And it is true that I think teachers are often thinking about very big issues and trying to help their kids get their arms around social forces, because certainly a lot of the forces that are around reopening schools are about things that are not particularly around education. I mean, a lot of what we hear around opening schools has to do with economics. It has to do with the political scene. And some of these forces are as powerful as our own desire, of course, to keep our kids safe and to continue their education. So we all recognize that this topic of restarting healthy physical activities and athletics and specific sports and working with state and local officials, and in some cases the federal government, involves planning specific facilities, whether it's field houses, gyms, rinks, turf and grass fields, pools, courts, gymnastics equipment, and all that goes into doing our best to ensure that kids are safe. So we'll be talking today about students, we'll be talking about coaches, parents, bus drivers, trainers, spectators, and there are multiple and intersecting challenges, and lots of issues and advice and regulations to manage, some of which we didn't invent. In all of this, I'm going to ask, first of all, and some of you have already touched on this, if you could just speak very briefly about your overall goals or your philosophy, what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And we understand that the foundation of all this, obviously, is the kids' safety. But some of you have already said, as Mike said, we just want to be sure our kids are able to take part in their activities. So, but I do think that just thinking about what our goals are in your program is a good place to start this discussion, because I think every discussion that we have has to start with our mission. What are we hoping to accomplish with our kids? How are we hoping to rebuild our school community? And how can we draw together everyone who's in our community to work toward the same objective and have, if not the same perspective, at least the same overall goal and purpose? So, Karissa, I might start with you just to start, and then perhaps move to Carol, just because you both have this large perspective working with lots of different schools. So if you just looked at what you saw as overall goals and philosophy, what are you seeing?
So thanks, Jay. So we do serve approximately 19,500 high schools across the country. And as Mike stated, the mission of the NFHS is really surrounded by, it's about participation, engagement in what we call the second half of the school day. So truly the co-curricular experience in athletics and activities, and all that those experiences do for growth and development socio-emotionally, and even how students engage in activity, grow academically, and become kids who are prepared to persevere beyond their school experience. I think what's unique from our perspective is that we want to be sure the education-based experience stands apart from some of the other sport and activity involvements that exist, that are high quality experiences, but not so rooted in the education-based philosophy, which is truly, again, about growth and development. So we are working hard to re-engage kids, re-engage families with the student-centered approach in mind.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Carol? When you're thinking about goals and philosophy that you see your schools trying to accomplish, what are the principal objectives that you see schools trying to reach?
I think everybody wants a safe return, and to determine how it's best to do that. And in our work, we wanted to make sure that anything that we put forward to help our schools, especially for this summertime workouts that a lot of schools are currently running, we based it on knowledge. It wasn't opinions, it was knowledge, so that whatever athletic directors had the opportunity to look at was going to be best practices. And I use that term kind of tongue in cheek, since this is changing on a daily basis, and maybe what was best practice last week may be different from what's best practice next week. But all the documentation that we have come across and that we've used as resources has been what's currently fresh at the time. Our document is evolving, changing weekly or every other week with new information, whether it's coming out from national associations or whether it's the opening process in New Hampshire that our governor is putting forth information on. So it's all about safety, and it's all about being smart and making sure that we're keeping groups small, so that if there is an issue, it's a limited issue as opposed to opening it up to what the maximum numbers may be.
Lamar, as you think about what Milton's trying to accomplish, and you're making plans with the faculty and the administration in your community, what goals are you trying to achieve with your kids and within the school community?
Well, Jay, you hit on it first. Safety is the number one concern, obviously. But outside of that, we're committed to providing an athletic opportunity for our kids in the afternoon. I think that's the number one thing that we're trying to focus on, because we feel so bad about the kids who lost out on seasons just in the spring. So just committed to trying to find athletic opportunities for our kids.
Yeah, thanks. Martin, speaking internationally, complex world.
It's very much the same. Safety first, we're looking at what's possible, and then working and being creative to give the students the best possible experience we can give them.
Yeah, thanks. Mike, do you look at your own objectives and philosophy for achieving them?
Yeah, so, we've spent the past few months, just planning for almost every scenario that we can imagine coming forward. But the reality is that we also know that, we don't know what the restrictions are going to be. We don't know what the guidelines are going to be coming up. Much of that is going to be dictated by the governor, the task force that we have here in our state, and then obviously what superintendents and principals are going through and trying to get their schools reopened. So, we've just kind of given guidance to our schools, and that's our role, is to support them in every way. They're supportive of extracurricular activities, of sports, and we just wanted them to know that we're going to be there for them when it's safe and when it's appropriate to get things open. So, we haven't publicly speculated on anything that we're thinking about at this point, because again, we don't know what the future holds. But we just want everybody to know that the plans are in place, and we're ready to support kids and keep coaches and officials safe, and everyone else that's involved. So it really is a complex issue that we're dealing with, but there's been a lot of guidance and support out there. But once the picture becomes clear, we'll be ready to unravel it very, very quickly.
David, what are the objectives you've been trying to reach in Brewer?
Well, obviously safety. Our situation in Maine is pretty unique to the situation around the rest of the country. Maine is in a very, very good spot as it pertains to the spread of COVID-19. Mainers have done an excellent job of sort of limiting the exposure up this way. We're one of the safest states in the country as far as that is concerned. So a lot of the discussion that we've been having is our state association, the Maine Principals Association, has been waiting patiently for some guidance from the State Department of Education and the superintendents, because those will be the folks that really decide what the academic piece. So a safe return to academics, I think, is priority number one in Maine. And then beyond that, what can we offer the kids safely? And whether that's a lot of the discussion that I've been trying to lead is, what sort of options do we have outside of the traditional offerings if we're not able to return safely to football, for example, or soccer as another example? What can we do to fill in that gap so that we're not creating conflict down the road by just moving sports into different places? A lot of work in a couple of leagues where we're trying to talk about regionalizing sport play within so to speak, community pods. Maine is very rural as far as the school layout goes, but there are competitive situations that we can get around one another, that we don't have to travel very far for competition. We're not in, Martin's situation where they're traveling across national borders, but we're traveling sometimes 2 hours away for regular season competition. And can we try to do that within 20 minutes or a half an hour?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're going to want to touch on this morning is whether people are changing their overall athletic schedules and the cohorts of people with whom they normally compete. So let's just pick up on that specific question. As you think about the competitive universe, and we talked about what Martin deals with in China. So I think I'll start there, because that you talk about Marco Polo. I mean, you're literally all over the world for your competition. So, and then I'd like to narrow the question down to how your schools, each of you, or the schools that you work with, Karissa and Carol, are thinking about changing their athletic schedules for the coming year. So, Martin, would you like to start about talking about scheduling for schools in the East?
Okay. We belong to a number of associations. Our main association for our varsity sports and arts is the Asia Pacific Activities Conference, or otherwise known as APAC. APAC is made up of 12 schools from mainland China, Hong Kong, Japan, the Philippines, South Korea, and Vietnam. So obviously, with the threat of international travel this year, we looked at it in May and reshuffled our divisions to increase the likelihood that at least some schools in the association will be able to hopefully attend tournaments and festivals. As the China border entry conditions are seen the most stringent and most challenging for a number of schools, we broke up the association into the 6 mainland China schools, with the other schools forming the other association. And hopefully we can get some sport going, and if need be, local schools can be brought in to make the tournaments viable.
Yeah, thank you. And Lamar, you spoke of working with the ISL and working specifically with the regional organization of athletics. Are you seeing people, or are you considering at Milton changing your cohort of schools with whom you would normally compete, or looking at your whole athletic scheduling challenge?
Well, there have been some schools have made some decisions about not coming back in competing in the fall, and so in some of those schools that we play against, so a lot of that's happening, a lot of that's changing. We've talked about a little bit of everything, whether we have, for the first time ever, we broke up into boarding into day schools and talked a little bit about the difference at each of those 2 respective type of schools. So there could be some of our boarding schools play against each other or not, if they choose to not do so. But some of our day schools may decide to want to play against each other as well too, if we get to that point.
Well, for the most part, independent schools tend to form leagues and tend not to compete with local public schools. Are you seeing any change of that as you talk with folks that maybe they might consider playing games with local high school or even elementary schools just because they're physically closer?
I'm not sure if it's gone down to that yet. I think a lot of the public and private schools are still just trying to gather more information and figure out what they can and cannot do right now. But
Yeah.
I mean, that could be an option as well.
Yeah. Karissa, what are you seeing at the national level in terms of scheduling and cohorts of schools who normally play each other, or rethinking scheduling?
That's absolutely one of the models we're seeing, Jay, that's emerging across the country in geographic locations where folks feel that it's safe to go ahead and resume across school or interscholastic competition. We are seeing some creative thinking there. We're also seeing in states where the climate is more friendly year-round, looking at changing sports from season to season. New Mexico and a few other states have moved football and soccer to this spring because they tend to be higher risk in terms of contagion. We're also looking at states that are considering starting a fall season with the lower risk sports, creating a middle season for the more moderately risky sports, and then moving the higher risk sports to a third season, which we might call spring. So we have states that are playing. Iowa is playing baseball and softball right now. We also have many states in preseason situations. And kids are getting sick. So we're really watching carefully how the return to play manifests itself and how precautionary measures are quick to respond if in fact illness occurs.
Thanks very much. Mike, you'd raised your hand on this topic. Please go ahead.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to add was one of the major challenges that everyone's going to be facing this year is transportation. Not only to school, but just with our extracurricular activities. So, making modifications to the schedule and trying to make things as flexible as possible for our schools is going to be very important. In our state, in Rhode Island, wherever your classification is in our state is really what you play the majority of your games in for the regular season, and then also the same for the postseason. So, even though our state's very small, looking at models of regional competition, splitting up JV and varsity contests are also things that we're looking at, because in many cases teams have played back-to-back where a JV and a varsity game will play on the same day. Transportation may dictate that that's not going to be possible. So what we're trying to do is just trying to loosen all the restrictions as much as possible from our end to make schools, or give schools the opportunity to be as flexible as possible for whatever their needs are going to be.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to ask, I'll come right back to you. David has also been rethinking school shifts, and then I'll come back to you, Lamar. David, because you've been thinking about this topic quite a bit.
Yeah, and I put some thoughts on paper, and our local media in Maine caught wind of it and ran quite a bit of coverage about it, and it generated a lot of great discussion and dialogue. For Maine, one of the things, Karissa had alluded to, New Mexico making the decision to move football and soccer to the spring. The governor of Michigan had about 3 weeks ago told her state association to start considering alternatives to contact sports in the immediate in the fall. So this isn't, this wasn't like a new idea. I mean, this had been talked about, but what's going to really prohibit Maine from trying to do this across the board in a clean flip of fall and spring is the climate that we're in up this way is going to really have to get us to be thinking creatively on, if we're going to take football and soccer out of the fall, realistically, we can't try to offer those in the month of April or earlier than that. It's going to really limit how much football and soccer we're able to offer. We've been talking about reducing schedules in the fall, starting sports seasons when school starts around Labor Day, things like that. But we do have at least a framework I've put on paper, trying to switch some of them. And a lot of that was centered around the work that the Federation had put out with the low risk, moderate risk, and the high risk activities, seasons created to, push those higher risk activities down the road. In my plan, I had created a new season for competitive cheerleading and wrestling that would start pretty much in the month of February, February through the beginning of April, which is completely indoors in Maine. We're not able to do anything outside during those months, and really provide a new window of opportunity for showcasing those activities as well. So I thought that would be kind of one of the fringe benefits of moving those there. Football and soccer would really have to be pushed almost into the summer months, starting late April, with competitive games starting in May and running through June even. I think transportation is going to be one of the major issues. Michael had alluded to that in Rhode Island. Rhode Island's a postage stamp if you placed it in the state of Maine as far as transportation goes. That's Maine is from southern border to north border is about 6 or 7 hours from Kittery to Fort Kent. So, we're worried a little bit about that busing piece, and that's sort of the concept on regional play cohorts and pods, is trying to get competition around your community, because that busing issue is going to be major, and that's on the forefront right now, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. David, Lamar, you had raised your hand. Please go ahead.
Yeah, and one of the things I failed to mention before, and David just alluded to it just a little bit, was this was even talks about playing like just little pods, like maybe there's a group of 3 or 4 schools that you just play those 3 or 4 groups of schools to limit contact with the virus.
Yeah, thanks. Would anybody else like to speak to this question of scheduling or reshuffling sports or looking at that? Carol, are you seeing anything that through your association that we haven't touched on yet?
Well, whatever happens is going to be up to the superintendents. I know this summer, some superintendents have allowed summer workouts to occur. Other superintendents said absolutely not. So, it's going to depend on what their opening is like, or if they do open, and, are they going to allow sports and at what levels? So, once a school opening plan occurs, it's my understanding that the governor of New Hampshire is going to be speaking this afternoon in regards to school openings. But, once individual school districts put a plan in place, whether or not that will include full-blown athletics or parts and pieces, we have yet to see.
Yeah, thanks. David, you had your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, before we move off the topic of the switch, I just want to make sure that people realize this isn't what Maine is doing. This is for us, this is a last resort. I know that the state association, the MPA, it's a last resort to avoid cancel. And yes, there will be conflict. One of the questions that I see in the chat is, what about the athletes that play both football and baseball, as an example? In my opinion, and this is one person's opinion, that working adults and professionals working through those conflicts is a better option than canceling a season outright. So if we're creating conflict down the road in the spring because we've got dual sports competing with one another, we can try to manage those conflicts as opposed to taking away the opportunities for the kids that don't have the conflict, that's their primary sport. So this is a last resort. That alternative was a last resort. If we're not in position to offer football and soccer in the fall, moving them to the spring, I think for the MPA would be the last resort. But what Carol said about the superintendents and the DOE, those, however they decide to return us to school in the local districts making those decisions, that will dictate what we're offering in athletics in our state. So that was a good.
Yeah.
Jay, I want to turn our attention to a question.
George.
We have a question that's trending on the Q&A, and it's about the influence of some of the high-profile announcements that have been made recently. We know that the Ivy League has canceled their fall schedule. Some New England colleges like Bowdoin have canceled their fall schedule, and just recently the Patriot League announced that they're canceling their fall schedule. So the question is, what influence or what help is it to have these kind of high-profile announcements? Are you using these in any way to inform your plans moving forward? Karissa?
Yeah, we've certainly been paying attention. My office where I sit right now is attached to the NCAA building, so we're over there all the time. for various reasons. But we are trying very hard to not allow the collegiate level decision-making and energy there to overlay on decisions that we're making in the education-based ecosystem. So we're trying to message from the national office the value of participation in co-curricular programs, why they're so important, again, to growth and development, and how our environments do differ from the collegiate to the high school space. So the NFHS office is going to be working with states to make sure that we are messaging in all of our platforms the reasons why high school decisions can be different. Middle school, elementary school decisions can be different. And because we are a little more geographically centralized with our age group, we can make these things happen for many reasons.
Yeah, thank you. Would anybody else like to speak to that specific question, Carol?
You know, as I stated earlier, we're putting together like a healthy lifestyle lesson plan, if you will. And the social and emotional piece of this for our student athletes is key. You know, I think we're all worried about them socially and emotionally, even more so than however they come to us after being off for 4+ months. You know, you can always, you know, start at a lower level of fitness and conditioning to get them back. But 4 months of missing their friends and, you know, the family dynamic that may be going on, you know, that's what's most disturbing for a lot of us in dealing with these high school age kids. So anything that we can do to bring them back in some way, shape, or form to be able to interact with their friends and get some, you know, fitness and conditioning out of it, as well as, you know, the mindfulness piece, the team building piece, that's going to be key.
Yeah, it raises a couple of questions that have also been raised by a number of people when they registered for that, and that's the question around communication. So I'm wondering how you have been communicating with your students, and obviously with their families and with their parents. So Lamar, could you talk about the way Milton has been communicating with the kids and also with their families around questions of athletics or the broader questions that you're also seeing throughout the independent school world?
Before we broke for the summer, we had a coaches meeting and we asked our coaches to kind of reach out to their athletes and just to really try to keep them motivated, keep them, you know, their hopes up for a fall season, and just having communication with them. Again, as much as the information that we are receiving is changing every single day, just staying in touch with our kids as much as we possibly can. As a school, we've sent out a number of emails to parents and communications to our parents and in our community, just letting them know some of our thinking and our plans as we move forward. And more communication is going to come as we get more information too.
Have you been soliciting the kids' perspectives? I mean, have you been saying to the coaches or any people in the athletic office, tell us what you're thinking, tell us what you're feeling? But one of the questions that was asked of us is whether you're seeing kids who are feeling genuine sorrow or sadness, particularly for kids for whom athletics is I mean, Chris talked about the balance, but we know for a lot of kids, it's not particularly balanced. I mean, the athletic component for them is hugely important, and important for them in terms of their college, and candidly in terms of college scholarships for a lot of our kids. Athletics are very, very important. So I just wonder if how you're communicating with the kids around their own feelings, that their careers and their lives are being impinged by this. I suppose you're all seeing this, but I just, if you've got a perspective, if you'd raise your hand, and I'd ask you just how you're talking with kids and how you're dealing with their own emotional state around losses or fears or concerns. Yeah, David?
We do a lot of connection with the kids through social media platforms. We're very active in our school on social media, whether it's Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, and you really need to know your audience on each of the 3 platforms. So we do have some connection there. It's not the same as the in-person stuff, but As of last week, we were able to, in Maine, get our students back working with coaches in small group pods. The MPA had allowed and designated a really, really good program that has allowed for that. And our kids have really come back to that in a very positive way. It's a controlled entry, controlled exit, controlled structure, but it's 1 hour every other day for a lot of those kids that they look forward to. It's that structure that they get back. We've had Zoom, this sort of platform meetings with kids. We've been allowed to remote coach. Coaches have set up Google Classrooms where they try to connect to their kids. We have one of our coaches who does do an exercise pod once a week with his cross-country runners, but he also has, because you are promoting the social and physical distancing space needed to pull off the exercise workouts, but he complements that with a weekly, team Google Hangout, and that way they can kind of talk to each other a little bit more and things like that. So a mix of a lot of different things, and now that we're kind of getting back into the physical aspect where we're seeing each other once again, it's really been good to see, and it's been positive.
Yeah, thank you very much. Carol, please.
A lot of our athletic directors have student athletic leadership teams, and they have been working with them, since this all started back in March, doing a variety of different activities, videos, and some have been posted on our website. So, they've been in contact with their student athletes, and some of the athletic directors that serve on our task force in anticipation of putting together this document that we're currently working on, they're meeting with their student athlete leadership teams to find out what it is that the kids want, what do they need, because they feel that it's important that they have a voice in this, and it's not just something that a bunch of adults sat around and put together. So it's important that we find out from them what they need, what they want, so that, it's a collaborative effort.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Carol. So important. Knowing that actually we're almost 2/3 of the way through our session this morning, so many questions we haven't gotten to, but I would like to turn to the question of facilities. David just put up the importance of signage. One of the things that we've seen in schools that have reopened in Europe, for instance, is they've made a tremendous and very clear program for signage everywhere. I mean, in the classrooms for kids who are coming into schools, in the bathrooms for kids, so they know that the sinks in some stalls are not. I mean, the signs have been very specific. So I'd just like to turn our attention to the facilities, because athletics, as we know, is a highly complex in terms of the facilities that you all deal with. And I'm interested in how schools are preparing their facilities, not only for high school athletes, but also for our younger kids, for whom there may not be a specific sport or activity that they play after school, but they're doing physical activity during the day. They're doing recess, they're working on all the play equipment that they may have in the schoolyard. So I'm just wondering how you are preparing your facilities, how you're thinking about cleaning the facilities, whether you're making modifications. I saw the other day, for instance, a picture of an exercise facility where they taped out on the floor essentially a square, and they said if you're in the workout room, you can be inside this square, but you can't go outside. It was just a simple way of preparing the facility so the kids would know, here's the space where you can be and be safe. So as you're looking at your facilities, what kinds of preparation are you making to modify those? Mike, you want to start talking about facility modification and planning?
Yeah, I mean, several things. One is that in our state, the governor's task force has put out some very good guidance. There's a website called www.reopeningri.com that covers many of these things. The CDC obviously has put out a lot of guidelines, and in particular, the National Federation has put out some tremendous resources for us to help in these areas for modifying whether it's facilities or rules modifications. There's an online course from NFHS Learn that just came out for coaches and administrators. That's a great resource. So there's a lot of information out there, but getting them into the hands of our schools right now, and just trying to get them to be able to plan accordingly is the most important thing. But sanitizing is obviously keeping things clean, and having a plan for that is going to be critical, not only for sports, but just in school in general, to keep kids safe. So, I think there's tremendous resources available for all those things, and the signage is going to help, but it's going to create, it's going to take a huge ongoing educational, promotional effort to make sure everybody's taking part in keeping everyone safe.
Yeah, thanks. Lamar, what are you looking at in terms of your facilities? Milton has a tremendously complex set of facilities for all kinds of different activities and sports, turf fields and grass fields and rinks. And how are you working with your facilities?
Yeah, same thing. We're looking at additional signage. We're looking at how we're going to have flow, like even just in the training room for our athletes in the afternoon. It's a huge task, to be honest with you, because we do have so many different facilities here, but just trying to find ways to continue to keep kids safe and our coaches safe and our athletic trainers and everyone else safe. So the signage is going to be a really, really big, important investment that we've already started to make, and just really having a good flow to our buildings.
Yeah, thanks. Martin, how about the facilities that you deal with in Beijing and around the world?
Obviously, each school is subject to the local government authorities, their directions. So we have a tremendous team at WAB who are making sure the facilities are cleaned, maintained, disinfectant. Our AT room, our storerooms all have UVA lighting installed in them now to help increase the disinfectant process. Signage, it's all there, and the Chinese government certainly makes sure that we have it all in place.
Yeah. Carol, what facility plans have you been considering in New Hampshire?
Each school has its own plan, but we do have athletic trainers on our task force, and they have really been quite helpful in a lot of the disinfecting piece of it. We have a doctor on our committee also. They've contributed greatly to some of the things that schools should start to do if they haven't done it already. I know some schools have called in outside companies to do the cleaning this summer, because some of the school buildings were shut down in March and have not been reopened and won't be reopened until they make a decision about school. Others have had administration in, so they've limited people, but they've all gone through signage and cleaning processes in order to get ready. I know for summer workouts, some of the schools have used paint to make grids on their fields for areas that the kids can work out in, whether it's half fields, quarter fields, as the rules have lightened up. But there have been a lot of grids painted on fields this summer. So
yeah, thanks. Karissa, how are you seeing across the country people handling the question of their facilities?
So
it's a
similar,
complex question.
yeah, sure. Across the country it is. But, I think each of our panelists has shared what we're seeing from a national perspective. One of the things that we're learning very quickly is that it's not so much surface contact that is the concern as it is the aerosol spread, respiratory droplets. So just for everyone's information, by the end of July, we will be releasing the results of an aerosol study that we are doing regarding the playing of musical instruments, singing and speaking, and aerobic exertion, on how those different activities result in aerosol spread. So we're seeing some equipment manufacturers considering, for a football helmet, for example, kind of a shield. We're looking at plastic if you will, barriers around various areas of equipment and even in music rooms around music stands. So we're really trying to pay attention to the aerosol issue. Definitely from a facilities perspective, outdoor activities are safer in the sense of, the reduction of aerosol spread. We're also seeing schools investing in HEPA filters for their rooms. So the average HEPA filter installation is about $1,400, and the resulting filtration is extremely successful. So we're looking at classrooms, gymnasiums, and the like, looking at all sorts of strategies to keep kids safer.
Mike, as you look at facilities, do you see people taking specific steps, such as the ones that Karissa just mentioned, that people in other districts might take advantage of?
Yeah. I mean, all these things are very, very helpful right now. And the short answer right now is that there's a lot of anxiety out there among everyone. And I think that there's a lot of information that keeps changing, but getting us, all on the same page is going to be very, very difficult, because looking back to the spring, I think it was very easy to make the decision, even though it was a difficult one. It was very easy to make the decision to close everything down, and because it happened all across the country, and it just so people were accepting of that. But I think right now, going into this year, things are different in every state, and even within the state, things are different in areas. So, all of these plans have to get into the hands of the local school districts and the administrators to be able to implement. So, putting together the educational resources for them to implement, and then just following up with support from our level, I think is what's most important heading into this school year. But again, it's a really difficult situation, because in Rhode Island, we're only in phase 3. That's the reality of our situation right now. So if we were going to start fall sports right now, we've only got limited options. We could really do baseball, softball, cross country, golf, tennis, and maybe swimming. That's the reality. Now that could change again next month, and that could change our plans. So it's really a difficult thing. And for the kids that are out there that are having this anxiety about their school year, I mean, we're going to do the best we can with the decisions that we can make at the appropriate time. So I know that doesn't make anyone feel any better about it, but that's the reality of what we're dealing with.
Could I ask a very specific question about kids who appear in the school who test positive? So you have a student who comes to school on Monday, they're fine. On Tuesday, the parent says they're staying at home. And on Wednesday, it turns out that they actually have COVID. What plans are the schools, your school specifically, making to deal with that possibility or eventuality? Lamar, when you think about kids at Milton, for instance, who show up testing positive, what's the school going to do? And that's just realizing that that's a very large question. I understand that.
It is.
What your thinking is around it.
I think we are actually we have a committee that is talking about exactly the steps that we'll take and the precautions we'll take once if that happens. I should say once that happens. I think it's inevitable that it will probably happen at some point in time. So that hasn't been released yet, exactly what we're going to do, but there is a group that is working on that exact question.
Yeah, thanks. Martin, how are you dealing with this in Beijing?
If we have a student at school who we have any suspicions about, they would be moved into an isolation room until they can be collected. Depending on the results of any tests taking place, the Chinese authorities would need to be notified, and they will certainly tell us what's happening.
Mm-hmm. David, how are you contemplating in Brewer what you might do for kids who are positive?
Well, I personally haven't seen anything on that just yet, because we're kind of a Labor Day start to the school year around here. It's a fairly late start, so we haven't really seen a lot of that. Part of the plan that the MPA had put out in Maine allowed for pod control, so to speak, that if there was an infected student or an infected coach, you were able to limit the pod exposure. That was sort of the mindset behind going to a 10 kids to every one coach ratio was that you could sort of isolate that pod and contact trace that pod only instead of a larger group. Now I have seen some of the, talking about cohorts of kids that all remain the same in the academic setting, and then you kind of rotate the teacher around to the students and things like that for that same sort of mindset, is that you put students in pods. And I'm not sure how well that will work in athletics, because you bring in a team from essentially another pod, you do that 15 or 16 times in a season, and how effective will that be? Even within a team like a football team, a big roster in Maine is 50 kids. Some schools have 70 or 80 kids. So we haven't really gotten there yet. I'm really interested in that topic, because it's going to be important, because at some point it will probably come up, and we're going to need to have action steps put in place that address that.
Yeah,
Jay, let
thanks
me
very
jump
much.
in for a second.
Yeah, please, George.
So we're really right up against the clock in terms of our time, and I know we may go over by a minute or two, but I do think there's one area that we haven't touched on yet, and that is people from the outside that are coming in. So we've got coaches, we've got officials, and we've potentially got spectators. And I'm just wondering, in the few minutes that we have left, if we could get some input from our panel about thoughts that they have about dealing with those people and how to keep our student athletes safe when we have these people from outside, quote unquote, that will be interacting with them.
Carol, could you start by speaking about the visitor question and the outside coach question and people who are coming in and out of the school community, parents?
Well, with a lot of what's happening this summer in New Hampshire, summer is a time where coaches can meet with their kids and have different workouts. So that's already been happening as far as the coaches go. And, to go back to what Dave said about the pods, that's how most schools started initially, with the group of 10, nine students and one coach to limit exposure. But, we in New Hampshire, the southern tier of our state, it has been the part of the state that's been most affected. And, I think whether parents will be allowed to be spectators or other fans will be allowed to be spectators is going to be up to each school superintendent and school board to make that decision. And I think it's going to vary based on where you're located in the state. If you're close to the Canadian border and you have not seen an outbreak, a large outbreak of cases, then you may open up your school and your facilities to more people. Whereas in the southern part of the state, where the majority of the cases have been, they may limit it and put other rules in place. Where they're saying maybe only family members, or limit family members, and everybody must be wearing a mask, etc. So it's really going to depend. In a way, we're like Maine, because our state has seen two very different groups of outbreak.
David, you'd mentioned live streaming as one option that schools might intensify their capacity to bring sports live, being video or even Zoom.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't imagine a situation. Our governor has put a 50-person capacity on non-essential gatherings, so I would imagine that youth sport would be in that, quote, non-essential. So you're going to have a lot of people who have interest in, even if it's a soccer game or a baseball game or a softball game, the ability to live stream that out so that family members and the community can still have a stake in your programming. There are free options for live streaming. I'll just give one away right now, is a basic iPad and creating a YouTube live channel. We did that last school year with a Huddle. Huddle is a platform that many athletic administrators would be aware of, but another group that's offering those sort of live stream cameras is Pixelot, and I know that they do a lot of work with the Federation, the Nfhs. They actually have a great deal on their Pixelot system right now, but something as simple as just an iPad and go live on YouTube on your athletic YouTube channel. You pay somebody like you would pay somebody to run the scoreboard. You just put them on the tripod and they follow the flow of the play. Our Huddle camera doesn't have any play-by-play or color commentary or anything. It just follows the flow of the play, and we have over 100,000 viewers of basketball, unified basketball and volleyball just within the last school year in our first year of going live streaming. So obviously it's dependent on where you have internet access, Wi-Fi ability and things like that, but those are some options that keep your communities interested in athletics.
Yeah. That's great. George, we're actually over our time. We so much appreciate all of our panelists. There have been a tremendous number of resources that have been shared on the chat. And those, as I know will say, those will all be on the NEASC website. So George, I'll give it to you to wrap up.
That's right. Thanks, Jay. And yeah, just a reminder that this webinar today has been recorded and it will be available on the NEASC website. And also, all of the chat will be seen, and we'll pull out all of the resources that will be available, and they'll be on the NEASC website as well. So if you missed anything, you'll be able to see it there. So I just want to conclude by thanking all of you for joining us today. Thank you for your questions and for sharing your thoughts. I'd particularly like to thank our panelists who gave up their time to share with us today. Really tough topic, so many questions, and unfortunately the answers are still evolving, and they're affected by the degree of COVID in a particular area. They're affected by state, national guidelines. So it is an evolving topic. Please remember to continue the conversation and to continue to share on Twitter using the hashtag NEASC Forum. And also please check our website for upcoming webinars that we'll be holding. So for our panelists, my co-host Jay Stroud, and everyone at NEASC, I'm George Edwards. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you all very much. It was great to have you here. We so much appreciate your help. Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks to everyone.